So far, you guys have had all of the features of effective instruction. Today is the last of the features of effective instruction. Like I've said before, all of these are married. You really can't do one without the other. So what we're going to do is I'm going to do my best to pull this one out, and we're really going to study this particular feature. So here are all the four. You've already had the training on explicit instruction with modeling. When you saw me in March, I did systematic instruction with scaffolding. Last year, I did multiple opportunities to practice and respond. And then today, all we're going to focus on is that immediate and corrective feedback. And I really like this quote because it's perfect. It basically takes feedback and spins it in a positive way. It says, give me a fruitful error anytime, full of seeds, bursting with its own corrections. Did you know when we make mistakes, that's actually how we learn? So our ultimate goal in our classrooms or in our faculty meetings is to set that environment that it is okay to make a mistake, because that's how we learn. Think about it. When we learn anything new, we usually mess up. And then somebody gives us some sort of feedback, very descriptive, and then we learn from that. And so we need to set that climate and that culture in our classrooms as well as our campus. So what I want you to do is just to kind of review our think, pair, share routine, which I'll call, and I'll start counting down from 5, and that's how we'll call it back. We're going to practice with this quote. So tell your neighbor why you personally think this is a very good quote for this particular feature. And also look at them and smile and say, good afternoon, I am so excited to be here. So go ahead and turn your neighbors and do that. All right, here are the objectives that I hope to cover today. If I do not before the end of the training, please let me know. We're going to actually define what immediate corrective feedback is. We're going to pull it out and we're going to examine it and look at what research says about it. Then we're going to apply it within the 5 components. We're going to look at some elements that makes it solid and enhances it. And then we're going to discuss this feature. We're going to look at 2 types of feedback. And we're going to look at lots of examples, okay? And apply it. We're actually going to watch a video, and then you guys are going to get to share at the tables and also share out, okay? So first off, I'm going to start off with a little warm-up. I'm going to read you an afternoon story. Oh, for those of you, raise your hand if you've heard of Amelia Bedelia. Yes. If you teach elementary or you have raised kids, you have heard of Amelia Bedelia books. So as I'm reading this, I want you to think of Amelia Bedelia. She's a little crazy little girl. She just kind of gets everything all backwards, all right? And see how this story actually connects to this particular feature. And then just sit back. It's always nice to have somebody read to you. Oh, Amelia Bedelia, your first day at work. And I can't be here, but that's okay. I made a list for you, and you do just what that list says Miss Rogers. And Miss Rogers got in the car with Mr. Rogers, and they drove away. My, what nice folks. I'm going to like working here, said Amelia Bedelia. Amelia Bedelia went inside. Oh, such a grand house. These must be rich folks. But I must get to work, and me with this whole list of things to do. And Amelia Bedelia stood there a minute longer. You know, I think I'll make a surprise for them. I'm going to make lemon meringue pie. I do make good pies. So Amelia Bedelia went into the kitchen. She put a little of this and a pinch of that in the bowl, and she mixed and she rolled. Soon her pie was ready to go in the oven. There, said Amelia Bedelia, that's done. Now let's see what this list says. Amelia Bedelia read, change the towels in the green room. Amelia Bedelia found the green room. Well, those towels are very nice. Why change them? She thought. Well, then Amelia Bedelia remembered what Miss Rogers had said. She said she must do exactly what that list said to do. So she said, well, all right, said Amelia Bedelia. So Amelia Bedelia got some scissors. And she snipped a little here and snipped a little there. She changed those towels. There, said Amelia Bedelia, and she took her list, crossed that off, and she said, okay, let's see, what does it say next? Dust the furniture. Did you ever tell of such a silly thing? At my house, we undust the furniture. But to each his own way, Amelia Bedelia took one look at the bathroom, and she saw a big box with words on it. What do you think that big box said? Dusting powder on it. Uh-oh. What do you think she's going to do? Yeah, that's what she's doing. Well, look at that. Special powder to dust with. So there she is. She's dusting it. What do you think her employer is going to think of this? She's not going to be too happy. Okay, but there's no one there to give her any sort of feedback, immediate or corrective. All right, well, so she got that done. So now she looked at the list to see what was next. It says, draw the drapes when the sun comes in, read Amelia Bedelia. And she looked up, and the sun was coming in. Amelia Bedelia looked at the list again. Draw the drapes? Well, that's what it says, but I'm not much of a hand at drawing. But I'll give it a try. So there she is. She's drawing the drapes. All right, so she marked that off. And then the next one says, put the lights out when you've finished in the living room. Amelia Bedelia thought about this a minute, and she switched off those lights, and then she carefully unscrewed each bulb. And she put those lights out. So these things need to be aired out too, just like pillows and babies. Oh, I do have a lot to learn. Then they asked her to measure a cup of rice. What do you think she did? If we're going to measure a cup of rice, what do you imagine her doing? She's pouring it in a measuring cup. She's got her measuring tape, and she's measuring it. And then she puts it back in the box. She's getting everything wrong on this list, isn't she? All right. So now they told her that when the steak comes in, she has to trim the fat off the steak. So she goes and gets ribbons and lace and so forth. And then the next thing on her list said that she must dress the chicken. She goes, well, I wonder if she wants a he chicken or a she chicken, said Amelia Bedelia. So Amelia Bedelia went right to work, and she started to dress that chicken. And then, while she's doing that, Mr. and Mrs. Rogers come home. Uh-oh. All right, well, they go outside, and Mr. Rogers goes, why are the light bulbs outside? She goes, well, you told me to put them outside, but there was nothing on the list that said I needed to bring them back in. It said put them out. She goes, oh, I do hope that they didn't get aired out too long. So then here comes Miss Rogers, and she's like, oh my gosh, the sun will fade the furniture. I asked you to draw the drapes. And she goes, but I did. Look at my picture. She showed her a picture. Then, when she looked around, she went, my furniture. So now she's really mad because all the dust all over the furniture. She said that was such nice dusting powder. Then Mr. Rogers is in the bathroom. He notices the towels. So then Miss Rogers comes running in there, and she starts freaking out because there's holes all over in her towels. Then she goes to the kitchen, and she's like, you dressed the chicken. Okay, so we have all had this situation where we thought we're very explicit, right? We provided the modeling, we planned it out, we were systematic, we provided the scaffolding, and we gave directions, and then our students still did not give us what we need. Well, in essence, that's what happened here. Okay, so I want you to go ahead and get out your red cardstock. And I want you to fold it into 4. So you're going to take it, you're going to fold it in half. And then you're going to fold it again. This. Where you have 4 boxes. And if you see up here on the screen, we have 4 sets of directions that we typically use in the classroom, or when we're having conversations with teachers. We use these a lot. Okay? So what I want you to do is I want you to put one of them in each one of the boxes. I've got the example up here. For example, number 1, in the left-hand corner, you can put draw conclusions and then fill in the boxes. So go ahead and do that for right now. I want you to reflect on these 4 directions, and I want you to think about, what would a student infer these directions to be if it was the very first time they ever heard them, or if I'm a second language learner, or if I've never been to school before? How would I infer them? If you said, okay, I want you to draw a conclusion, let's take our steps to drawing an inference. What are those? I want you to identify that problem and that solution, and I want you to elaborate on the theme. If I just threw those directions out, that was the first time you ever heard of it, what would they do? Think of Amelia Bedelia. Sometimes some children will take us very literal. What do you think they would do? Okay? And in that box, I want you to either write words, phrases, or maybe even draw a picture to refer what would they do. And I gave you a little bit of an example here. Let's say drawing conclusions. Maybe it's attempt to activate the background knowledge to anchor thoughts. Drawing a conclusion, they may not even know what a conclusion is, so they may just draw a picture. Okay. So go ahead, you can work as a table to do this. You don't have to do this on your own. And on the back, think of other things that we say at school, either directions or things that we just reference all the time that actually children could either misinterpret or actually take the wrong way. And this is what you can put it on the back. Like, for example, number 2, put that in your own words. We say that all the time. Give me the definition, but you got to put it in your own words. What are some other things that are said or directions that are given that students could be confused or take the wrong way, like Amelia Bedelia did? 1, as I was walking around the room, a couple things I saw was show your work, use your inside voice, especially over here at the daycare. There's a lot of things we like to say to very, very young children that they can take very literally. And so especially with second language learners, we really need to be careful when we start talking in phrases and idioms and so forth. So really the whole purpose of this is to show that there's a lot of times we give directions or we explain something and people can interpret it or infer it the wrong way. And if we wait too long, then what they've done is practiced the error over and over and over. So the whole key is to be immediate with our feedback and then be corrective and descriptive with our feedback. Think about poor Amelia Bedelia. If she was in that bathroom and she's like, oh, you want me to dust the furniture? Oh, look, it's a dusting powder. And somebody caught her right there and said, yes, that's dusting powder, but that's not what we use with that kind of powder. We use that to put on us to make us smell good, not on our furniture. This is what dusting the furniture means. If somebody would stopped her right then and gave her some of the corrective and immediate feedback, then she wouldn't have done it. Okay, so what it is, she went the whole day doing all of these errors and so forth. So that's really the point, is we say these directions over and over all the time, and we need to be really aware of what we're doing, and we need to check for understanding. Instead of waiting till the end of the lesson, we need to be doing it periodically and planning that. So here's what a little bit of research says about immediate corrective feedback. It says it is it's when the teacher directly imparts his or her evaluation of a child's strategies, skills, or their achievement, which is usually related to goals, and provides information about that evaluation. The whole purpose of feedback is to close that gap. When they're learning, we want to keep it, giving them feedback in order to create the learning. We don't want them to keep practicing errors over and over. That is the ultimate goal of immediate and corrective feedback. And you remember this from the last one. This is our lesson cycle. So where does this feature fall into this particular lesson cycle? Since you guys have had all of them, what do you think? You tell me. Where do you think it would even fall? Would we only do it in the I do? Only in the we? Or only in the you? What do you think? I heard somebody say it everywhere, all of them. All of them. Because if I'm doing some direct, explicit instruction with modeling that I do, I'm going to want to put it in chunks, and I'm going to want to check for understanding to make sure they're still with me and they're not misinterpreting me or misinferring my lesson as I'm going along. So I want to build that into that I do. And of course the we do. That's still the guided practice. I want to make sure that they're not practicing. Remember, practice makes perfect. So we want to make sure what they're practicing is the right thing. And that's where that immediate and corrective feedback happens. If they make a mistake, we give them that corrective and that descriptive feedback. We reshape that learning so then they can get back on track. The you do. A lot of times we think of, well, you know what, that's the assessment. So you give that at the end. Maybe a grade, that's where we put the grade. I want you to think about this. As an individual, if I was grading something of yours, and I put some written feedback on there, some descriptive feedback, which would you read first? The grade. So think about that. That's just kind of some food for thought, because a mistake is how we learn, right? When we make mistakes, that's how we learn. So if I'm in that you do and I have turned something in and you're looking at it and you're grading it and you're going to give them feedback because they've made all those mistakes, think about when you want to actually give the grade. Do you want the written feedback and have a debrief and a conversation with them, then give them the grade? Because more than likely they're just going to look at the grade and not even look at your feedback. So just kind of sit on that and think about it. All right, so there's two types of feedback that we're actually going to be talking about today. One is evaluative feedback. We think of that as more judgmental. That means the teacher's more in control. I say something, and you basically have to take it because I'm giving it to you. All right, so it's that kind of feedback. One direction. Formative is more descriptive. I'm being descriptive with my feedback, very corrective, and it's back and forth. I do it, I'm trying to reshape and close that gap on the learning, and then I ask you to give me that retrieval. You retrieve it, and you give it back to me. So I'm trying to close that gap to make that mistake now where you're actually back on track. So let's talk about the first one. So when we think of evaluative feedback, it's really like giving rewards or punishments. It could be giving approval, disapproval, thumbs up, thumbs down, way to go, give them the teacher look, something very simple as that. Stickers, erasing the points, taking the R down, and by the time I get to recess, you lose it. It could be that type, taking the marble out of the thing. That's type of evaluative. I'm giving it to you. I'm not asking you to give me anything back. It's very evaluative. Way to go, good job. Okay? Is it necessary? Yes, this type of feedback is necessary, but we also need other types of feedback. Another way to think of evaluative feedback is sometimes we praise, and we either praise the person or we praise the effort and process. And what we want to keep in mind that when we praise a person, such as it sounding like this, you solved all those math problems very quickly. You see how smart you are? What I've done is I've praised you as a person. And I don't know if you've heard of Carol Dorick. She calls that as I put you in a fixed mind state, that you define yourself by your intelligence. So I've praised you as a person. And what we want to do is not do that. We want to praise the effort or the process. So that same type of thing could sound something like this. You tried very hard on this. Nice job. You put a lot of effort into this. Way to go. You are well informed when it comes to this type of math problems. So I did the same thing, but I praised the effort instead of the person. Okay, so when we think of being evaluative, we do want that kind of feedback, but try to praise the effort and the process versus the person. And this is just a note for you all as administrators. on each one of your campuses, your pre-K and your kindergarten teachers have gotten this brochure. Does that look familiar? And even the daycares? It's called Praising Children. It's a brochure. It's really short on the research on how praising efforts actually affect motivation later on down the road. Okay? So just kind of give you a heads up that your pre-K and your kindergarten teachers have this in hand. Okay? All right, so let's look at the second type of feedback. This one is formative. Write the word descriptive up at the top of this slide. Formative feedback, and write the word descriptive. Research says that when we make our feedback formative or descriptive, this is where we show that learning. We close that gap, and this is where the children actually grow in their learning. Okay, so there are actually 5 different types of way of providing formative feedback. First one, we can do something as simple as telling students they are right or wrong. 2, describe why that particular answer is correct or incorrect, telling the student what they have or have not achieved, specifying or implying a better way, or helping students develop ways to improve. Okay, so now what we're going to do is the next couple slides, we're actually going to look at each one of them. So we're going to take the very first one, telling students they are right or wrong, and we're going to look at an examples, 2 of them together. Okay? Then after we do this, there's actually going to be an activity where you look at examples, read the scenario, and go, what kind of feedback is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Okay? So this is kind of like a we do where we're going to do it together, and then you're going to have the we do where you do it at your table. Okay? All right, so let's look at the very first one, telling students they are right or wrong. Here's an example of how that might look. A student correctly defines the word justice as the state of being free within society, which is actually the definition you just did with liberty. So when you asked them what justice means, they just told you the one that you just finished, liberty. You could say, no, anyone else? Or you could say, does the way that you've defined justice make sense in the context? Let's go back and look right here. Does it make sense? Or you could say, what word has this definition? It's not justice, but it's a word we have worked on. So basically, what part of this is telling them that they're right and telling them wrong? Right. Okay, very good. The last one says it's not justice, but it's the word that we've worked on. Okay, so I've told you what part is wrong about it. So it could be something as just simply as telling them, this part's right, this part's wrong. So you could change this to, no, the word justice means fair behavior or treatment. What does justice mean? And then ask them to repeat that back. What's really good is anytime that you want them to repeat the correct answer back to you, okay? Because when they retrieve that answer from their head, you've just given it to them, and then they dip in and retrieve it and then respond to you, that's where the closing of the gap actually happens. Okay, here's a second one. Student points to the word should, but says shalled instead. So they're tracking along and they said shalled. You could say no, anyone else? We don't want to say that. Or you could say, does this sound right? The present shalled be wrapped before the party. And then the student goes, no, that doesn't sound right. And you're right. You say, no, it should be wrapped. So what's the word? And then you have them repeat it back to you. That's right, the word is should. And I know probably what you're thinking right now is, wow, that's a lot of talking, right? But if I would have just said, no, that's not the word, what can they do with that? Nothing. Okay, so when we give formative, descriptive, corrective feedback, yes, you're using a lot of words. I'm not going to let you off the hook on it because that's how the learning, okay? Step in there and we're going to help them. All right, so now let's look at the second one. The second one could be this type of formative feedback. You're teaching, you got this conversation going on, and you may only just do this. You're going to describe why an answer is correct or incorrect. So instead of just telling them they're right or wrong, this is right, you're going to describe why it's correct or why it's incorrect. So it may be something as simple as this. During the summer writing instruction, a teacher might say, you captured the main idea in the first part of your summary, but additional things happened that led the characters to the decision that drives the second part of the text. You've included details leading up to that decision, but you have not included the decision or the deciding factor that shaped the second part of the text. So they're having their writing conference, and this could be something that the teacher actually says. Okay? Now let's look at this one. A teacher might say, look in the text for the same spelling of owl as in the sound as the word house. A student says cloud. The teacher could simply say yes or more in line with this. I'm going to describe why they got it right. It may sound something like this. Yes, you're absolutely right. Cloud has that same sound and spelling as owl as in the sound house, and it's spelled O-U. As they touch the spelling and say the spelling. So now they're adding that scaffold. So the descriptive part is a scaffold because you never know. Maybe the student just got lucky. That's why we add that descriptive part to it. This one is probably the one that you really want to use when you're giving formative and descriptive feedback. Because we want to be very careful that we don't do this. And you guys, I'm going to raise my hand because I'm guilty of it. When I went and did observations with teachers, I caught myself saying this. Oh, I really like how you use that graphic organizer. And I say, I like. Like we're on Facebook, I like, okay? We don't want to say I like. And if you use I like, add the descriptive part. Meaning, I'm going to tell you why it was the right way or why it was the wrong way. I'm going to describe it. I like the way you were using that graphic organizer. You were modeling it, you were pointing to it, and you were using a think aloud to describe the thinking process behind that graphic organizer. So now I told them I was very descriptive with it. Okay? So this particular one is what you want to use with teachers. And it takes planning. You can't just go in and observe. That's why when we come out and we do those TA visits and we observe, we ask for that team debrief because we collect our notes and we think about exactly how we're going to word it to the teachers. So we don't say, well, I like, or that wasn't right, and then I don't have anything to tell them. So we want to be very descriptive. Tell them why, tell them why not. Okay? So if you don't do any type of formative feedback, this one's probably a biggie for your role. Okay, all right, so we're going to fast forward. Telling students what they have or have not achieved. So it may sound something like this. Now, a lot of these you're looking at them and going, well, they sound kind of the same thing, but it's just a little bit different. So if we look at this example up there, it could be, let's look at this second part right here. We have passed objectives 1, 2, and 3 with flying colors. We now need to work on objective 4. Let's examine what we need to work on. So I've told them, we got 1, 2, and 3. We're rocking and rolling on that. 4 is what we need to work on. So now let's look at 4 to find out what aspect of it we need to work on. Okay? I've told them what they've achieved and what they have not achieved. Very clear. So that's what we mean by being very formative about it. Okay? Here's this one. I want you to read this one on your own, and I want you to highlight what this teacher indicated that the student has not done and has done. We're telling students what they have and have not achieved. So do this one on your own. Read it up there. And tell me what part of it just told the student what they have done and what they have not done. So what do you think? Popcorn it out. So we're working on three words in the text. We have the same spelling as Al as in the word outside. So what part did they get right? She tells them how many? Two. Okay, you're doing really good. You're rocking and rolling. You got two words, boundary and foundation. But what have they not done? We just need what? One more. So she's very descriptive. We only need one more, not five. One, just one more. Okay? It's telling them what they have and have not achieved. Okay, next one is specifying or implying a better way. This one you'll probably see when they're doing like writing. Okay? This is this type of formative feedback you would probably use when they're working on writing. And so it may sound something like this. You're having this writing conversation and you may use sentence stems like this. A better way to do this might be, or can you please tell me a way that you might complete this to make it, okay, better, cleaner, more concise, organized, or a little easier to understand. Okay, so you can tell this one isn't as descriptive. It's more of less of a scaffold. I'm letting you give me the other half of it, but I'm giving you a leading statement to kind of guide your learning, such as, can you tell me a better way? Can you explain this a little bit better to make it more complete? So I'm guiding you. I'm kind of leading you in the right direction to give me that answer. So remember the formative, back and forth. I give you, and then I want you to give me something back. Okay? So let's look at the last one. Helping students develop ways to improve. And it may be something as like this. Got that same example up here? We're working on writing samples. We got 4th grade writing. We're putting either a 1, 2, 3, or 4. We're showing them examples. And we say this particular student scored a 1, 2, 3, and 4. Let's talk about how we can get our own writing to a 4. So we put that 4 up there. And then we're analyzing the other types, the other ones, and going, how can we get this to a 4? It could be something as simple as asking these different questions. So we ask these leading questions, trying to guide that learning. What would make this part better in order to make it a 4? It's a 2, so what do we need to do with this particular line to make it better? What have you done well right here? What can you improve? Tell me how you got this, or tell me how you would improve this, or what would you change? So what if you did this? What would happen? Would it be a 2? Would it be a 3? Or would it be a 4? Describe the next step that you would take in order to get this from a 2 to a 3. So it's not a descriptive, it's not more of I'm telling you, here, this is what you got wrong. It's more of, I'm leading you to the right answer. So it's a different type of feedback. So depending on the circumstance, depends on what type of feedback you would use. All right, now so a lot of you are thinking, wow, and I got to do this off the cuff? No, it is that 4-letter word that sometimes people are afraid of, and it begins with a P. What is it? Say it loud. Say it louder. Plan, let's spell it. P-L-A-N. That is how it's going to do it. Your data, either it's informal or formal, your curriculum, all of that is going to help you plan and anticipate what areas you may have to give that formative or corrective feedback. Some possible questions that teachers can just ask themselves are these 3 simple questions. During the activities today, Could I provide feedback to students? Where could I provide them? I have all of this planned during my math lesson. Based on data in prior lessons, I'm already anticipating a potential barrier. So if they break down right here in this particular lesson, what type of feedback of those 5 would I need to give? The evaluative comes naturally to us. We just naturally go, yeah, that was it. We do that naturally. The formative feedback, we have to plan and we have to kind of think about. It takes practice. Once you get it, it becomes a little bit natural. 2, the second question they can ask you is, what are some phrases I should avoid when providing feedback? And then the third one, what are some phrases I should use when providing feedback? So maybe they want to have some standard phrases that they just start off with. Anytime I'm providing this type of feedback, helping students develop ways to improve, right here, what would make this better? Tell me how. Those are going to be my favorite things I say for a while until I can make it where it becomes natural and I'm used to it, then I can move on and try something else. Okay? So it's really planning. It's anticipating those potential barriers, knowing your content, knowing how your students are responding to your instruction and so forth, what your next steps are. Okay? All right. So students providing feedback. Well, we know with formative, it's back and forth. You can actually teach your students how to do this in cooperative groups and so forth, where they give each other feedback. And how you do that is you have to highlight and put a star by next bullet, by the first bullet. You have to set your classroom up as a supportive culture and climate. Your classroom as well as your campus. And that's just teaching them that we all learn from our mistakes. Put yourself out there and say, hey, I've made a mistake and this is how I've learned to do it better. We all learn from mistakes. If you set that up as that mistakes are learning opportunities, that's really what a mistake is a learning opportunity, then you have set that climate and that culture up. You got to model. This is how we give good feedback. This is not good feedback. So you practice it. And practice and then provide the support. Now this is what we had teachers do. We had the teachers make an anchor chart that students can use in their classroom. So when they're working in groups, what would formative feedback look like in their group? Okay? But what we're going to do is, this is what your chart paper is. You guys are going to think from an administrator's standpoint. If you had to take this little anchor chart or cheat sheet or scaffold and stick it in your office because you've got that teacher that you're having to really work with, you're going in there and doing lots of observations and you're going to have to give lots of formative feedback with them, you need your cheat sheet over here. What are some sentence stems that you want to give yourself as hints? Words, what not to say. What are some phrases you want to stay away from? Okay? And what are some things that you want to do? Remember, we don't want to say I like, I like, I like. We want to be very descriptive and informative because we're wanting to change that behavior. Take that mistake and make it a learning opportunity. So that's what you guys are going to do. Nobody's going to have to stand up and share, so this is what you're going to do. I'm going to give you, is that right? No, that's not right up there. I'm going to give you 4 minutes to kind of just create yourself an anchor chart. Don't be, it's not, this is, nobody's going to get an art prize. You can make it something as simple as that. You can make it just a list. You can use your mascot for your school. Do whatever. Just draw a triangle, square. It's really a cheat sheet. Okay? And then what we're going to do is you're just going to put it up here on the wall, and then I'm going to give you guys 2 minutes to kind of walk around the room and just look at each other's and get some ideas of maybe possible sentence stems. Remember how I said you might want to grab a couple, and that's what I want to hold on to for a while until I get it? Okay, so go ahead and get started. You guys did a great job on these anchor charts or these scaffolds for yourself. You guys were descriptive. You guys put some thought into it on providing those sentence stems for yourself when you're having to have conversations with teachers. Awesome. See, I used evaluative as well as formative feedback for you. All right, so what do you look for when you go into the classroom? Well, you want to see that teachers are providing immediate and corrective feedback, evaluative as well as formative and descriptive, either in a verbal sense or nonverbal. Okay, you want to see it all. You want to see it written feedback. Instead of just putting that grade on the paper, you want them to actually be giving some written feedback. And when we think about feedback, keep this in mind. We want to analyze the errors, not critique the errors. Meaning we don't want to grade with a pen in hand. So if I'm grading and this particular line has 2 misspelled words, if I fix those misspellings, guess who did all the work? Me. Now I've got an example over here on the table. I can have a code that is in agreement with you that when I put a dot, that's the key, that's the visual, nonverbal cue to you that you have a misspelling there. So on that line, I could put 2 dots. So that tells you as a student, oh, I've got 2 words misspelled there. So I've given you some nonverbal written feedback. So now you can go back and see if you can find your misspellings. Okay? So really be careful, especially middle school and high school. You take those big stack of papers. I know it's more work, and they grade with the pen in hand, but sometimes, and it's okay to give feedback and make corrections, but sometimes you actually do it all for them. And so it's really not feedback. You just did all the work for them. So kind of sit on that and think about that, and maybe ask that kind of reflective question. Feedback, you can give it whole group, you can give it small group, you can give it to partners, to an individual. It can happen in any type of setting. Okay? The key is, and also write this on your notes on this particular slide, you want the feedback as close to the learning moment that you can get it. The further away it is, then they've pretty much forgotten. And you almost have to go back and reteach them and remind them what they did and why they made the mistake. So try to make it as close as possible. And I know that that's hard, especially in middle school and high school when you have all these class periods and you got this stack of papers. So maybe having conversations with teachers maybe about using rubrics where I'm only going to grade the organization part first and I'm going to give you feedback. Then you add to it and I give you feedback. Do the next step, I give you feedback. Do the next step and give you feedback. Take that and put it all together for your final grade. So now I'm giving the feedback close to the learning moment instead of at the very end and I'm grading all of it. So just kind of think about that. All right, so now we're going to do a little activity, and based on I'm looking at the clock, we're going to kind of improvise, and I'm going to change it up a little bit so you can still experience both parts. This is the first part. So what I want you to do is get out handout number 1 and handout number 2. Okay, handout number 1 are scenarios. Handout number 2 is what you're going to write on. I'm going to model first for you so you know how to use these handouts. I'm going to do number 1. So when everybody put your finger on number 1 and follow along with me. Here's what I would be doing if I'm sitting at my table. I would first read the scenario. Matthew's trying to segment the word dinosaur into syllables. He's able to segment die, no, but then he says s, then or. His teacher responds with, Matthew, you did a great job on the first 2 syllables, dino, but you only have 1 syllable remaining. Listen, dinosaur. And she says, let's do this together. Dinosaur. No, you do it, and they do it. Now, what is it? What's that last one? Dinosaur. Very good. Okay, so then I would ask myself, go to handout number 2. So then the question I would ask is, what type of feedback did she give? Well, 1, she gave some evaluative in there, great job, but the bulk of it is actually, number 3, telling the student what they have and have not achieved. So my observation was, she said, you got the first 2 syllables, you just need that last one. So when she clapped it out and gave him the scaffold, that visual and kinesthetic scaffold, he was able to get to it. So that was my impact, and that's what I would write there. Okay? So now what I want you to do is on your table, you're going to see an index card that says table 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you're going to have numbers, either 2 through 4, a range. What you're going to do is only pick one between that range. For example, if I put 2 through 4, you decide, do you want to do 2, do you want to do 3, or do you want to do 4? As a table, pick a scenario, work through just one scenario. Does that make sense, or do I need to repeat that? I see some blue cups. Does everybody have a red cup? Okay, start off on red because you guys are rocking and rolling. You guys are on fire. If you need my help, change it to blue. I don't see every table. Yes or no? Ready? Every table's ready so I can go pick a card? Or do I have somebody that wants to volunteer and I don't have to pick my playing card up here? Anyone want to volunteer? All right. Everybody's like, thank you. Thank you. See, she didn't have to pick a card. Okay. All right, let's track the speaker. Got a different person thinking, and I don't have a mic, so let's give him our attention.
We had number 9.
So they're doing scenario 9 if you want to follow along.
So first of all, there was a focus on what happened that was good. The implicit and explicit questioning sections was good. And then we talked about what they needed to work on. So that was the telling students what they have and have not achieved. And then she went on to talk about the way that they're going to make improvements on the thing that she hadn't achieved. So it's really both of those pieces.
Both of those pieces.
Very good. Thank you for sharing. Let's give him a hand. Woo! See, that's not scary to share out. All right, so now a lot of you guys, I had a couple of you guys trying to put your administrator hat on. Now you get to put your administrator hat on because this is what you're going to get to do for, and I've lost my clicker. Oh, thank you. So this is what you're going to get to do now. I want you to think of your own example as an administrator. And I know, because I've already heard each one of you are like, oh, I was just in a classroom. So I know somebody has been in a classroom today. So I want you to think, I just saw a teacher, and maybe you want to have one person that just went into a teacher's classroom today, share what they saw. And then as a team, I want you to come up with your own scenario on what kind of descriptive, either evaluative or formative or a combination of both that you would tell the teacher. All right, so now you come up with your scenario, then get out handout number 2, and everybody goes, well, what type of formative feedback did we just give, either evaluative or formative, and do this exact same process, but with your own scenario, okay? Has anyone went into a classroom today? Okay, so why don't you share what you saw today, and then everybody else is going to work together on what would we say to that teacher? What kind of feedback would we give? And change your cup to blue if you need my help. As I was walking around the room. Anyone want to share their conversation they were having at their table? You want to share? Awesome. Okay, let's track the speaker. We have a volunteer.
I can't talk really loud.
That's okay.
I walked into the classroom today. The teacher was doing circle time, group time, large group, and she was doing rhyming words. So she used her own name as Lawson, and she said, what could rhyme with Lawson? And then they came up with Dawson, because they were picking different alphabets, Cawson, you know, and she wrote her name Lawson, and then Dawson, and then she said, and then we have another child here named Bryson. His name, does it sound the same? Bryson. And they said, yeah, it rhymes. And then one of the children came up and said, well, Allison, because there's Allison in there. And that was not the goal, was the rhyming words. But she said, you are right, it has S-O-N. And she wrote it on the chart, and she said, let's clap. And she did the celebration. So she did Bryson, Lawson. And she said, let's do Allison. And of course, it was 3.
Oh.
And she said, are they the same or different? How are they the same? And they said, the N, S-O-N, they could spell it out. But there were 3 claps, so 3 syllables. But she scaffolded her learning. She set aside her learning goal, which was the rhyming words, and went to the syllable.
So she helped them, she scaffolded it and helped the child recognize and realize where the learning was broken down and so forth. So she used some evaluative as well as formative.
It was a brilliant observation of that 4-year-old child to realize that there was another child in the room with her name on the word wall that had S-O-N.
And so you would very good.
I was like, wow.
So, and so when you said you were impressed, you were very
I'm impressed because you went from rhyming words into the syllables, and so smoothly. It was a smooth transition.
very good. So she gave a little bit on her feedback was what? Was it only formative? Or was it evaluative as well as? Both. So she did both. You did this very well. You did a great job. And then she was very descriptive on the part of her lesson where she did a really good job. Very good. Thank you for volunteering. I didn't have to draw a card. Everybody give her a hand because she volunteered for you. Yay! Thank you. All right. Get out handout number 3, and we're going to watch this video. And what I want you to do is watch this teacher. What types of feedback does she do? She actually does both. She gives evaluative and she gives formative. Sometimes she leads the answer, sometimes she clarifies, sometimes she's very descriptive.
We read many books and past adventures. Some were stories, and some had facts. What are books that include facts called? Books that have facts. Megan, what do we call those books?
Books that have facts are called nonfiction. And
Absolutely. So let's repeat that. Books that have facts are called? Yes, ma'am?
Informational.
They're informational books. Why are they called informational books then? Raquel, you said it was informational. Why is that informational? What do nonfiction books do for us?
Like help us learn.
Help you learn
Facts.
facts that can be
Proven.
facts that can be proven. Excellent. Now, books that have stories, what do we call those books, Dakota?
Those books are called fiction
And why are they called fiction?
because they don't really tell us anything. They're just very silly.
Some of them are very silly.
Well, she obviously gave some evaluative because this, it is a first grade classroom. But think about how was she formative. Sometimes it was very subtle. Sometimes she clarified, like, yeah, you were right, but she was wanting more. So what did she do to take that feedback and get more from it? All right, we know she did evaluative. Does anybody want to say which one that right off the bat that we know for formative she's done? 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 when we're thinking of it? Which one? 5. Can you read that out loud for us?
Helping students develop ways to improve.
She did that a lot throughout the lesson. They would say that, and she was trying to build onto their learning and add more academic language. Yes, you're right, and. Yes, you're right, and. So she was going evaluative, formative. She was going back and forth with the two. So that tells us that we do need both of those types of feedback. Just the formative is very descriptive, and that's what takes the mistake and shapes it into a learning moment. Okay, here are these elements. You've seen these with all of the other features. This is how it would apply to this one. Planning, put a star around that, put a smiley face around that. We have experienced that today, that you need time to anticipate potential barriers or breakdowns in learning so that you know where you might have to give feedback. Even as administrators in here, if we block off 30 minutes to go observe a teacher, we should maybe give ourselves only 20 or 25, step out of the room so we as individuals can reflect on what we saw. What type of evaluative feedback do we want to give, and how do we want to make that formative? I have a lot of teachers that come to me and say, My principal says I need to work on this. My principal says my classroom management's not very good and I need to work on it. That's evaluative. So what we want to do is we do that naturally as administrators because we got to do business and we got to get it done. So what we need to do is step out and give ourselves time to plan what we're going to say in a formative way. Because if a teacher says, he says, I need to work on my classroom management, you know what? That's just like me going up to the student and going, no, that's not the right answer. That's basically what I said to the teacher. You're not doing it right. That's not right. And that's it. So it's the same thing. So the teacher made a mistake. Here's a learning opportunity. What descriptive, how do I make it formative in order to grow them? You've got to build in that time so you can give that descriptive and formative feedback. This will increase your teacher's pacing. It will also increase your pacing throughout your day if you build in that reflective time for yourself. Grouping, we already know we can do this in any type of grouping format. Draw a line from assessment into data. Your assessment, your data, and your curriculum based on how they performed and how they're responding to you will tell you what you need to do to plan for immediate and corrective feedback. When you do this, when we do that immediate and that corrective part of feedback, it is a scaffold. When we give that corrective descriptive part, it's a scaffold. So therefore, we are differentiating. When I know that I can feel safe and make a mistake and that it's going to turn into a learning moment, I am motivated to learn. And therefore, our management and the classroom, as well as our building, is automatically there. We're not going to do this, but if we were to do this, it is a written conversation. So basically, in essence, it's think, pair, share on a piece of paper. You can easily do this in your classroom or in a faculty meeting. By actually having them, I want you to think about what we talked about here today, and you can either ask a question, make a comment, and then they're going to pass it around the table and have a written conversation instead of a verbal conversation. That's really what this was, if we were going to do it. All right, so in conclusion, we do know that feedback is really based on our belief. Evaluative feedback is necessary, and yes, we do need to use that, but it's more teacher-controlled. We're just giving the information. There is no tennis game or going back and forth. Feedback, evaluative, could either be positive or negative, but formative, put a star by this. This is where we take that mistake and turn it into a learning moment. This is where our students or our teachers share the control and the feedback. They take responsibility for our learning. That's where we take it and make it more reflective. So the ultimate goal, and I want you to circle this, of feedback, is transformation of learning. We take that mistake and turn it into a learning moment. Remember, our feedback needs to be timely. It needs to be very descriptive. It needs to be positive, very clear and specific, and differentiated based on individuals. And as Robert Allen says, there is no such thing as failure. It's just feedback. And if we set that culture in our classrooms and our campuses, everyone will be lifelong learners. So you're going to get one last opportunity to practice. They're passing out an evaluation. So I would really appreciate, because it helps me grow as an individual, if you give me evaluative feedback along with formative and corrective and descriptive feedback. Thank you very much. You guys were an awesome audience.